Hello, this is Mr. Russell, your AP Biology teacher. Today we're going to be looking at, or continuing our discussion on biochemistry, and we're going to be, in particular, we're going to be talking about carbon. Organic chemistry is just a branch of science that deals with the element carbon and its many properties. It's usually associated with all living organisms, and carbon is found in about 30% of an organism's dry weight. Think about dry weight, that's a term called biomass, which is just carbon in its organic molecules. So I want you to circle the term biomass here. Carbon helps to make up organic molecules like carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And we think, where does carbon come from? It's thought that, according to the Stanley Miller experiment that we discussed earlier in our notes, he conducted experiments that show that carbon came from carbon dioxide, which was from the process of photosynthesis in plants. Well, let's step back a little bit. Let's think about our valence electrons. What is the valence number for carbon? In other words, how many electrons in its outer shell? Well, if you said 4, you were correct, because you can look at its outermost valence electron shell and see that there are 4 electrons out there. Okay, Stanley Miller, let's look back at this again. This took place back in the mid or early 50s, 1953. What he did was he took inorganic substances found in Earth's early atmosphere, such as water vapor, hydrogen, ammonia, and methane. So we're looking here on the screen, you're looking at NH3 being ammonia and CH4 being methane. And he created organic amino acids and oils. Well, carbon dioxide, or CO2, and methane, CH4, are not considered organic compounds even though they contain carbon. There are 20 amino acids that are used to make proteins in living organisms. Well, if we think back about early Earth, Mr. Miller, what he did was he analyzed volcanic gases to determine what the air could have been like back then. And when he conducted his experiment, he needed something to create some sort of electrical spark. So what he did was he used electrodes to create electricity rather than, and then that actually replaced the lightning that would have been the energy source to create the amino acids for early Earth. Now, let's look at carbon's electron configurations. Carbon has versatility in 4 directions because of its tetravalence. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Tetra meaning 4. So what I want you to do is I want you to at least underline the term tetravalence, and up above it I want you to write tetra equals 4. Or you can just circle that in your notes if you have them. Well, the tetravalence allows carbon to act like an intersection in a building of an organic molecule. This allows cells to build an almost indefinite number of different molecules. Like you can see here, this can go on forever. When we think about covalent bonding capabilities of carbon, well, you can have single bonds between carbon atoms, like you can see here. You can also have these double bonds, like you see down here, and then you can also have triple bonds, which would be something similar to this. Alright, now, if we continue on here and we look at other properties that involves carbon and organic chemistry, hydrocarbon tails are the phospholipids, and we're going to get into this pretty in-depthly soon. If you think about hydrocarbons, these are molecules containing mostly carbon and hydrogen. Most hydrocarbons are considered to be an energy source. So some examples are fossil fuels, oils, and fats. So the more hydrogen atoms in a molecule, the more energy there is in a molecule. So when you look at this that I've got here, these hydrocarbon tails, lots of hydrogen, that's going to equal lots of energy. Now, hydrocarbons are important parts of the cell membrane. They make up the tails of the phospholipids. This picture here, this is just showing a phospholipid tail. Here again, you can see the fatty acids that make up that phospholipid tail. We know that all hydrocarbons are extremely hydrophobic. Remember, hydro being water and phobic being fear of, so they're afraid of water. And the reason is because they're afraid of, the reason is because they are nonpolar. They're afraid of water's polarity. And lots of hydrocarbons here in the phospholipid bilayer. So you can see these located in here, lots of these. Here's the polar head up here on the top. Here's the non-polar tails through here. So there's not going to be water inside this middle membrane. Water can be here, water can be here, because these polar heads are hydrophilic and the tails are hydrophobic. Alright, let's look at functional groups that involve carbon. Functional groups are associated with organic molecules. If something is functional, is your cell phone functional? If it is, that means it works. It has a job to do, to send and receive messages, to communicate effectively. Well, these functional groups, these are sites of most organic molecule chemical reactions or properties. So remember, they have a function to do. Well, on these functional groups, let's look at the first one, hydroxyls. So we're looking at hydroxyls. We're looking at this OH group right here. When we look at the OH group, this is a group that allows a molecule to act as an alcohol or a polar molecule. Names usually end with OL or all. Alcohol. This is a hydroxyl, OH. You can see the hydrogen and you can see the oxygen, which equals hydroxyl. Now, if we move on and we look at our carbonyls, this only has one double bonded oxygen. It takes one stroke to make a lowercase n, carbonyl. Aldehydes are good examples. A is at one end of the alphabet. Carbonyl is located on the end of the molecule. Ketones, K is in the middle of the alphabet. Carbonyl is located in the middle of the molecule. So here we can see what we're talking about here, which is going to be, see if I can draw this for you. There would be an example of a ketone, and then here would be an example of an aldehyde. It's at one end of the molecule. Here, this ketone is in the middle. So here we're seeing this double bonded oxygen, and that would be our carbonyl. One stroke makes the lowercase n, carbonyl. Okay, now let's look at our carboxyls. Our carboxyl has two oxygens, one double bonded and one single bonded. Here's our double bonded, here's our single bonded. It takes two strokes to make an X. There's our X, carboxyl. So carbonyl, one stroke, carboxyl makes two. So we've got two bonds going on here. These molecules can act as an acid by losing hydrogen atoms and can also possibly be polar too. Okay, let's look at our amine groups here. Our amine groups right here, they contain nitrogen. Here's your nitrogen right there in the middle. Alright, so these can act as bases because they can pick up a hydrogen. Here you can see your amine group. Well, where have you heard the term amine? I would think, if you can think back to something you hear pretty frequently in our foods or in diets, and amino acids. So amines. We're going to see that one pretty frequently in this class. Well, sulfhydryls. So if you think about what's in the name, sulfhydryl, it contains sulfur. It also has hydrogen. So sulfur can make a disulfide bridge. Di meaning two. It makes a disulfide bridge for pockets in protein formation. And we're going to look at that a good bit later as well. Just for now, get familiar with the terms. Look at what's written in there. It's not only that it could be written as the sulfhydryl, but also you can see down here that it can be written backwards as HS as well. It still has the sulfur, it still has the hydrogen, so it is a sulfhydryl, creates a bridge. Now, the last one we're going to talk about today is a phosphate. These contain phosphorus. These molecules are usually involved in energy transfer, such as associated with ATP. It can also act as an anion or a negative ion. Alright, so go back and take a look at these. We've talked about organic chemistry containing carbon. We talked about the Stanley-Miller experiments. We looked at carbon's electron configuration, its tetravalence and covalent bonding capabilities. We also looked at hydrocarbons and their ability to carry energy. We also looked at the functional groups and the different ones, the hydroxyls, carbonyls, carboxyls, amines, sulfhydryls, and the phosphates. Okay, this is all for this session, and we will pick it up next time.